Tantor Audio presents Running on Empty, Overcome Your Childhood Emotional Neglect by Janice Webb, Ph.D. Narrated by Karen White. Preface. Writing this book has been one of the most fascinating experiences of my life. As the concept of emotional neglect gradually became clearer and more defined in my head, it changed not only the way I practiced psychology, but also the way I looked at the world. I started to see emotional neglect everywhere, in the way I sometimes parented my own children or treated my husband, at the mall, and even on reality TV shows. I found myself often thinking that it would help people enormously if they could become aware of this invisible force that affects us all, emotional neglect. After watching the concept become a vital aspect of my work over several years and becoming fully convinced of its value, I finally shared it with my colleague, Dr. Christine Musello. Christine responded with immediate understanding and quickly began seeing emotional neglect in her own clinical practice and all around her as I had. Together, we started to work on outlining and defining the phenomenon. Dr. Musello was helpful in the process of putting the initial words to the concept of emotional neglect. The fact that she was so readily able to embrace the concept and found it so useful encouraged me to take it forward. Although Dr. Musello was not able to continue in the writing of this book with me, she was a helpful support at the beginning of the writing process. She composed some of the first sections of the book and several of the clinical vignettes. I am therefore pleased to recognize her contribution. Introduction. What do you remember from your childhood? Almost everyone remembers some bits and pieces, if not more. Perhaps you have some positive memories, like family vacations, teachers, friends, summer camps, or academic awards, and some negative memories, like family conflicts, sibling rivalries, problems at school, or even some sad or troubling events. Running on Empty is not about any of those kinds of memories. In fact, it's not about anything that you can remember or anything that happened in your childhood. This book is written to help you become aware of what didn't happen in your childhood, what you don't remember. Because what didn't happen has as much or more power over who you have become as an adult than any of those events you do remember. Running on Empty will introduce you to the consequences of what didn't happen, an invisible force that may be at work in your life. I will help you determine whether you've been affected by this invisible force, and if so, how to overcome it. Many fine, high-functioning, capable people secretly feel unfulfilled or disconnected. Shouldn't I be happier? Why haven't I accomplished more? Why doesn't my life feel more meaningful? These are questions which are often prompted by the invisible force at work. They are often asked by people who believe that they had loving, well-meaning parents, and who remember their childhood as mostly happy and healthy. So they blame themselves for whatever doesn't feel right as an adult. They don't realize that they are under the influence of what they don't remember, the invisible force. By now, you're probably wondering, what is this invisible force? Rest assured, it's nothing scary. It's not supernatural, psychic, or eerie. It's actually a very common human thing that doesn't happen in homes and families all over the world every day. Yet we don't realize it exists, matters, or has any impact upon us at all. We don't have a word for it. We don't think about it, and we don't talk about it. We can't see it. We can only feel it. And when we do feel it, we don't know what we're feeling. In this book, I'm finally giving this force a name. I'm calling it emotional neglect. This is not to be confused with physical neglect. Let's talk about what emotional neglect really is. Everyone is familiar with the word neglect. It's a common word. The definition of neglect, according to the Merriam-Webster dictionary, is to give little attention or respect or to disregard, to leave unattended to, especially through carelessness. Neglect is a word used especially frequently by mental health professionals in the social services. It's commonly used to refer to a dependent person, such as a child or elder, whose physical needs are not being met. For example, a child who comes to school with no coat in the winter, or an elder shut-in whose adult daughter frequently forgets to bring her groceries. Pure emotional neglect is invisible. It can be extremely subtle, and it rarely has any physical or visible signs. In fact, many emotionally neglected children have received excellent physical care. Many come from families that seem ideal. The people for whom I write this book are unlikely to have been identified as neglected by any outward signs, and are in fact unlikely to have been identified as neglected at all. So why write a book? After all, if the topic of emotional neglect has gone unnoticed by researchers and professionals all this time, how debilitating can it really be? The truth is, people suffering from emotional neglect are in pain, but they can't figure out why, and too often neither can the therapists treating them. In writing this book, I identify, define, and suggest solutions to a hidden struggle that often stymies its sufferers and even the professionals to whom they sometimes go for help. My goal is to help these people who are suffering in silence, wondering what is wrong with them. There is a good explanation for why emotional neglect has been so overlooked. It hides. It dwells in the sins of omission rather than commission. It's the white space in the family picture rather than the picture itself. It's often what was not said or observed or remembered from childhood rather than what was said. For example, parents may provide a lovely home and plenty of food and clothing and never abuse or mistreat their child, but these same parents may fail to notice their teen child's drug use or simply give him too much freedom rather than set the limits that would lead to conflict. When that teen is an adult, he may look back at an ideal childhood, never realizing that his parents failed him in the way that he needed them most. He may blame himself for whatever difficulties have ensued from his poor choices as a teen. I was a real handful. I had such a great childhood. I have no excuse for not having achieved more in life. As a therapist, I have heard these words uttered many times by high-functioning, wonderful people who are unaware that emotional neglect was an invisible, powerful force in their childhood. This example offers only one of the infinite numbers of ways that a parent can emotionally neglect a child, leaving him running on empty. Here I would like to insert a very important caveat. We all have examples of how our parents have failed us here and there. No parent is perfect, and no childhood is perfect. We know that the huge majority of parents struggle to do what's best for their child. Those of us who are parents know that when we make parenting mistakes, we can almost always correct them. This book is not meant to shame parents or make parents feel like failures. In fact, throughout the book you'll hear about many parents who are loving and well-meaning, but still emotionally neglected their child in some fundamental way. Many emotionally neglectful parents are fine people and good parents, but were emotionally neglected themselves as children. All parents commit occasional acts of emotional neglect in raising their children without causing any real harm. It only becomes a problem when it is of a great enough breadth or quantity to gradually emotionally starve the child. Whatever the level of parental failure, emotionally neglected people see themselves as the problem, rather than seeing their parents as having failed them. Throughout this book, I include many examples or vignettes taken from the lives of my clients and others those who have grappled with sadness or anxiety or emptiness in their lives, for which there were no words and for which they could find little explanation. These emotionally neglected people most often know how to give others what they want or need. They know what is expected from them in most of life's social environments. Yet these sufferers are unable to label and describe what is wrong in their internal experience of life and how it harms them. This is not to say that adults who were emotionally neglected as children are without observable symptoms, but these symptoms, the ones that may have brought them to a psychotherapist's door, always masquerade as something else: depression, marital problems, anxiety, anger. Adults who have been emotionally neglected mislabel their unhappiness in such ways and tend to feel embarrassed by asking for help. Since they have not learned to identify or to be in touch with their true emotional needs, it's difficult for therapists to keep them in treatment long enough to help them understand themselves better. So this book is written not only for the emotionally neglected, but also for mental health professionals who need tools to combat the chronic lack of compassion for self, which can sabotage the best of treatments. Whether you picked up Running on Empty because you are looking for answers to your own feelings of emptiness and lack of fulfillment, or because you are a mental health professional trying to help stuck patients, this book will provide concrete solutions for invisible wounds. In Running on Empty, I've used many vignettes to illustrate various aspects of emotional neglect in childhood and adulthood. All of the vignettes are based upon real stories from clinical practice, either my own or Dr. Musello's. However, to protect the privacy of the clients, names, identifying facts, and details were altered so that no vignette depicts any real person, living or dead. The exceptions are the vignettes involving Zeke, which appear throughout chapters 1 and 2. These vignettes were created to illustrate how different parenting styles might affect the same boy, and are purely fictitious. Are you wondering if this book applies to you? Take this questionnaire to find out. Emotional Neglect Questionnaire. Take a moment to think about your answers to the questions that follow. Do you 1. Sometimes feel like you don't belong when with your family or friends? 2. Pride yourself on not relying upon others? 3. Have difficulty asking for help? 4. Have friends or family who complain that you are aloof or distant? 5. Feel you have not met your potential in life? 6. Often just want to be left alone? 7. Secretly feel that you may be a fraud? 8. Tend to feel uncomfortable in social situations? 9. Often feel disappointed with or angry at yourself? 10. Judge yourself more harshly than you judge others? 11. Compare yourself to others and often find yourself sadly lacking? 12. Find it easier to love animals than people? 13. Often feel irritable or unhappy for no apparent reason? 14. Have trouble knowing what you're feeling? 15. Have trouble identifying your strengths and weaknesses? 16. Sometimes feel like you're on the outside looking in? 17. Believe you're one of those people who could easily live as a hermit? 18. Have trouble calming yourself? 19. Feel there's something holding you back from being present in the moment? 20. At times feel empty inside? 21. Secretly feel there's something wrong with you? 22. Struggle with self-discipline? Did you answer yes to any of these questions? This questionnaire gives you a window into the areas in which you may have experienced emotional neglect as a child. Part 1. Running on Empty. Chapter 1. Why wasn't the tank filled? I am trying to draw attention to the immense contribution to the individual and to society which the ordinary good mother with her husband in support makes at the beginning, and which she does simply through being devoted to her infant. D.W. Winnicott, 1964. The Child, the Family, and the Outside World. It doesn't take a parenting guru, a saint, or, thank goodness, a Ph.D. in psychology to raise a child to be a healthy, happy adult. The child psychiatrist, researcher, writer, and psychoanalyst Donald Winnicott emphasized this point often throughout writings that spanned 40 years. While today we recognize that fathers are of equal importance in the development of a child, the meaning of Winnicott's observations on mothering is still essentially the same. There is a minimal amount of parental emotional connection, empathy, and ongoing attention which is necessary to fuel a child's growth and development so that he or she will grow into an emotionally healthy and emotionally connected adult. Less than that minimal amount, and the child becomes an adult who struggles emotionally, outwardly successful perhaps, but empty, missing something within, which the world can't see. In his writings, Winnicott coined the now well-known term, good enough mother, to describe a mother who meets her child's needs in this way. Parenting that is good enough takes many forms, but all of these recognize the child's emotional or physical need in any given moment, in any given culture, and do a good enough job of meeting it. Most parents are good enough. Like all animals, we humans are biologically wired to raise our children to thrive. But what happens when life circumstances interfere with parenting, or when parents themselves are unhealthy or have significant character flaws? Were you raised by good enough parents? By the end of this chapter, you will know what good enough means, and you will be able to answer this question for yourself. But first, if you are a parent as well as a listener, you may find yourself identifying with the parental failures presented in this book, as well as with the emotional experience of the child in the vignettes, because you are no doubt hard on yourself. Therefore, I ask that you pay close attention to the following warnings. First, all good parents are guilty of emotionally failing their children at times. Nobody is perfect. We all get tired, cranky, stressed, distracted, bored, confused, disconnected, overwhelmed, or otherwise compromised here and there. This does not qualify us as emotionally neglectful parents. Emotionally neglectful parents distinguish themselves in one of two ways, and often both. Either they emotionally fail their child in some critical way in a moment of crisis, causing the child a wound which may never be repaired, acute empathic failure, or they are chronically tone-deaf to some aspect of a child's need throughout his or her childhood development, chronic empathic failure. Every single parent on earth can recall a parenting failure that makes him cringe, where he knows that he has failed his child. But the harm comes from the totality of important moments in which emotionally neglectful parents are deaf and blind to the emotional needs of their growing child. Second, if you were indeed emotionally neglected, and are a parent yourself as well, there is a good chance that as you hear this book, you will start to see some ways in which you have passed the torch of emotional neglect to your child. If so, it's extremely vital for you to realize that it is not your fault. Because it's invisible, insidious, and easily passes from generation to generation, it's extremely unlikely and difficult to stop unless you become explicitly aware of it. Since you're listening to this book, you are light years ahead of your parents. You have the opportunity to change the pattern, and you are taking it. The effects of emotional neglect can be reversed. And you're about to learn how to reverse those parental patterns for yourself and for your children. Keep listening. No self-blame allowed. The ordinary, healthy parent in action. The importance of emotion in healthy parenting is best understood through attachment theory. Attachment theory describes how our emotional needs for safety and connection are met by our parents from infancy. Many ways of looking at human behavior have grown out of attachment theory, but most owe their thinking to the original attachment theorist, psychiatrist John Bowlby. His understanding of parent-child bonding comes from thousands of hours of observation of parents and children, beginning with mothers and infants. It suggests, quite simply, that when a parent effectively recognizes and meets her child's emotional needs in infancy, a secure attachment is formed and maintained. This first attachment forms the basis of a positive self-image and a sense of general well-being throughout childhood and into adulthood. Looking at emotional health through the lens of attachment theory, we can identify 3 essential emotional skills in parents. 1. The parent feels an emotional connection to the child. 2. The parent pays attention to the child and sees him as a unique and separate person, rather than, say, an extension of him or herself, a possession or a burden. 3. Using that emotional connection and paying attention, the parent responds competently to the child's emotional need. Although these skills sound simple, in combination they are a powerful tool for helping a child learn about and manage his or her own nature, for creating a secure emotional bond that carries the child into adulthood, so that he may face the world with the emotional health to achieve a happy adulthood. In short, when parents are mindful of their children's unique emotional nature, they raise emotionally strong adults. Some parents are able to do this intuitively, but others can learn the skills. Either way, the child will not be neglected. Zeke. Zeke is a precocious and hyperactive 3rd grader, the youngest of 3 children in a laid-back and loving family. Lately he has gotten into trouble at school for talking back. On one such day, he brings a note home from the teacher describing his infraction by stating, "Zeke was disrespectful today." His mother sits him down and asks him what happened. In an exasperated tone, he tells her that when he was in the recess line, Mrs. Rollo told him to stop trying to balance a pencil on his finger, point side up, because he might stab himself in the face. He frowned and snapped back at Mrs. Rollo by telling her that he would have to bend all the way over the pencil like this, demonstrating, to stab himself in the face, and that he isn't that stupid. In response, Mrs. Rollo confiscated his pencil, wrote his name on the board, and sent him home with a note. Before describing how Zeke's mother actually responded, let's figure out what Zeke needs to get from the coming parent-child interaction. He is upset by the incident with his teacher, whom he generally likes, so he needs empathy. On the other hand, he also needs to learn what is expected of him by his teachers in order to succeed at school. Finally, it would help if his mother has noticed emotional attentiveness, that lately he is very sensitive to being treated like a baby because his older brother and sister leave him out a lot due to his age. Zeke's mother needs those 3 skills: feeling a connection, paying attention, and responding competently in order to help Zeke with his problem. Here is how the conversation went between mother and son. Mother: Mrs. Rollo didn't understand that you were embarrassed by her thinking you could be stupid enough to stick your eye out with a pencil. But when teachers ask you to stop doing something, the reason doesn't matter. It's your job to stop. Zeke: I know! I was trying to say that to her and she wouldn't listen. Mother: Yes, I know how frustrated you get when people don't let you talk. Mrs. Rollo doesn't know that you're dealing with your brother and sister not listening to you much lately. Zeke relaxes a little in response to his mother's understanding. Yeah, she got me so frustrated, and then she took my pencil. Mother: It must have been hard for you. But you see, Mrs. Rollo's class is very big, and she doesn't have time to talk things over like we are right now. It's so important that when any grown-up at school asks you to do something, you do it right away. Will you try to do as asked without saying anything back, Zeke? Zeke: Yeah, Mom. Mother: Good. If you do what Mrs. Rollo asks, you'll never get in trouble. Then you can come home and complain to us if you think it's unfair. That's fine. But as a student, respect means cooperating with your teacher's requests. This mother's intuitive responses in this conversation provide us with a complex example of the healthy, emotionally attuned parenting that leads to the sane, happy adult whom Winnicott describes. What exactly did she do? First, she connected with her son emotionally by asking him to tell her what happened before she reacted. No shaming. Then she listened carefully to him. When she first spoke, she provided him with a simple rule that an 8-year-old can understand. When a teacher asks you to do something, you do it right away. Here Zeke's mother is instinctively attuned to his stage of cognitive development, providing him with a general rule to use at school. She immediately follows the rule with empathy and naming his feeling. Mrs. Rollo didn't understand that you were embarrassed. Hearing his mom name the feeling, Zeke is able to express more of his emotion to his mother. I know! I was trying to say that to her and she wouldn't listen. Again, his mother responds to Zeke by naming or labeling the emotion that drove Zeke's rude behavior towards his teacher, the behavior of contradicting her that was viewed as disrespectful. Yes, I know how frustrated you get when people don't let you talk. Zeke, feeling understood, responds by repeating this emotion word for himself. Yeah, she got me so frustrated, and then she took my pencil. But the mother isn't finished yet. She has, in this conversation, demonstrated to Zeke that she understands him and feels for him by demonstrating that she sees his behavior differently than his teacher does. However, she can't stop there because his tendency to debate, the likely result of having two highly verbal older siblings, will continue to be a problem for Zeke at school unless he can correct it. So his mom says, It's so important that when any grown-up at school asks you to do something, you do it right away. Finally, she holds her son accountable for his behavior, setting the stage for future check-ins on his feisty nature by asking him, Will you try to do as asked without saying anything back, Zeke? In a conversation that appears deceptively simple, Zeke's mother has avoided shaming him for a mistake and named his feelings, creating the emotional learning that will allow Zeke to sort his feelings out on his own in the future. She's also supported him emotionally, given him a social rule, and asked him to be accountable for following it. And in the event that Zeke repeats this behavior at school, she will adjust her message and her actions to adapt to the difficulty he is having in the classroom. Remember, Zeke, because I will be using him several more times to help describe the differences between...
Sample complete. Ready to continue?